Hello and welcome to this video broadcast. My name's Stuart Wilson. I'm the Corporate Marketing Director at Key Group. I'm delighted today to be joined by a number of subject matter experts, and I'll introduce these guys in just a moment. As at the time of recording this broadcast, we're now into, I think it's the 5th week of lockdown, and an awful lot has happened in that time in this industry. I think it's fair to say in the first couple of weeks things got quite sticky in terms of moving this industry forward. There was not really a clear route through. In one foul swoop, lockdown kind of took away the three legs of the stool, if you like. Advice, which is predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly done face-to-face, could no longer happen face-to-face. Valuations, which requires a valuer to go and physically walk around somebody's property, that can no longer happen. And legal advice, which is legally mandated to be, there's a process of face-to-face legal advice, and the requirement of a mortgage deed to be signed meant that in one foul swoop this industry could no longer move forward. But I've been working in financial services long enough to know that this industry always manages to find a way through, and very quickly, I would say, managed to find a route through, whether it's remote telephone based advice or video based advice, which obviously advisors are doing now, but also on the valuation side and the legal process side. Very quickly, given the complexity of those subjects, this industry has managed to find a way through, and it's those latter parts that I wanted to talk about today. So I'm really delighted to have some people who are far better qualified than I to talk about those particular subjects. So I'd like to quickly introduce the people that you're seeing on your screen today. So we've got representatives from our valuation partners, esurv, and also from Equilaw, one of the most preeminent expert legal firms in this market. So we've got from Equilaw, we've got Claire Barker. Welcome, Claire, Managing Director. And also it's great to have you along today, because I know that you sit on the Equity Release Council's standard board. So I've got some points to put to you. I'm sure our advisor audience would love to hear more about. We've also got Ailsa Roberts. Welcome, Ailsa, who's Operations Director at Equilaw. And from esurv, we've got Leon Coles, who's the Regional Operations Director, and Mark Goodfellow, who's a Product Lead at esurv. So welcome to Leon, and welcome to Mark as well. Thank you all for joining me this afternoon, and we've got a number of questions that I put together that I think as we've been talking to advisors over the last couple of weeks, and I've been on video conference calls with some of the big specialist firms over the last 5 to 10 days, and a lot of questions that they're putting to us actually do centre around these issues of valuations and the legal process. Advisors are very, very keen to get more insight into this new way of working, this new remote way of working. So I wanted to start with the valuation process, if we may. And Mark, I think a question to you, if I may, in terms of what we are now badging sort of remote valuations. This is a very different way, of course, of how we would normally operate in this market with a physical valuation. So can you sort of talk us through at a high level the way this works and the differences between a remote and a physical, obviously apart from the obvious one of a valuer not being in the home, but the differences between the processes from a valuer's point of view?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So remote valuation is effectively one of 3 appraisal methodologies that surveying firms and lenders can adopt. The most common one is the physical appraisal, in which a surveyor is instructed to attend the property, to do a walkthrough and a walk round of the property to derive a valuation. A lot of lenders over the past couple of years have switched to what are called automated valuation models. So these are automated valuations using algorithms and historical data to provide a valuation of a property. Also, a number of lenders historically have conducted what are called drive-bys, whereby a surveyor would effectively drive by a property and do a valuation from the roadside. So over the past couple of years, a lot of lenders have sort of questioned the use of drive-bys. So as a result of that, eSurv developed a remote valuation product, which effectively does what it says on the tin. It's a piece of technology that allows a valuer to do a valuation without having to physically inspect the property. Now, a lot of lenders, as I say, using AVM models, but as we go through this COVID lockdown, the transactional data will start to deteriorate, which will have an impact on the confidence levels of AVMs. So we anticipate that the use of automated valuation models may reduce over time. So this places more emphasis on the remote valuation product. And what the valuer is presented with is a whole raft of data, property imagery, and other information, which they will use as part of their assessment, but also apply their local knowledge of similar properties, local housing demand, to derive the valuation. So it's a combination of effectively using data technology plus the local surveyor's knowledge to provide an accurate figure of that property. So with regards to remote valuations, not all properties are suitable for that appraisal methodology. So to manage the risk around remote valuations, we agree with each lender a set of risk parameters. And what we will do is when we receive an instruction, depending on the suitability criteria derived by the lender, we will triage those cases and convert those ones that are deemed less risky to a remote valuation. And there's a number of data sources that are used to cross-reference the property address to make sure that if there are any issues, for example, that the property is situated within a high flood risk area, then we wouldn't do a remote valuation on that. That would be then allocated to a full physical inspection as when the COVID social distancing restrictions are relaxed by government. So that triage process up front is very important to ensure that the most suitable cases are then allocated out to the surveyor.
Great stuff. And I want to sort of come back to those sort of data points that you mentioned just a moment ago. But Leon, if I may, I think there's lots of terminology floating around, and some people talk about remote vals and some people talk about desktop valuations. Are they one and the same thing, or are they slightly different?
Different, and I guess the key thing for eSurv is the remote valuation, and the significant difference is the fact that we have a local element within it. So all our remote valuations are undertaken by local valuers who are familiar with the area, and desktops tend to be more of a central model, where often the valuer has no knowledge of the area physically, and can cover much wider patches, which naturally increases the risk and isn't as accurate. So that's our key point, that the local knowledge is key when undertaking remote valuations, as the valuer makes all the difference to the data feeds that come in and that we receive. So things like school catchment areas, known local defects, amenities, desirability and demand that you just wouldn't know from data if you didn't have that local knowledge of the area. So no amount of data will replace that local knowledge, which helps us combine the knowledge of the valuer in the local area and the data to give a much more accurate picture without the physical valuation, of course.
Brilliant, thanks, Leon. And Mark, back to that the data issue. So can you give us a bit more of a walkthrough of some of those additional data points that you're using for your remote valuation, and how they complement and add more flavour and colour to the valuations?
Yes, of course. So once the job has been determined as being suitable as per the triage criteria, the instruction itself is then sent directly out to the valuer on his or her iPad. Now, the remote valuation application is a fully integrated mobile app, and there are effectively 6 sections that the valuer will walk through and complete to sign off the valuation. So the first part of the valuation process is what we class as our research section. This is whereby the valuer will research various property portals, including Rightmove and Zoopla, to determine whether that property has a digital footprint. So again, they will be using photographic evidence that's been put on marketing portals, looking at the property, both interior, exterior, to assess the condition of that individual property. The valuer then also have the opportunity to interrogate the land registry dataset to look at previous transactional history. So what did the property sell for over various time parameters. And then we also then call upon our own data set. So e.surv being the largest residential surveying firm in the UK, we have a whole raft of information and volume of inspections that we've done. So if we have completed a previous valuation on that same property, the valuer can look at the previous site notes and derive information from that. We then move into what we class as our view section, and the view section then is links into Google Maps. And within Google Maps, we actually draw down the property boundary from the land registry. So using the eastings and northing coordinates for the property, the valuer is actually then drawn directly to that individual property. So from Google Maps, they've got the ability to look at and overlay the satellite imagery. So this will give the valuer insight into the surrounding streets, neighbourhoods, etc. And then using a Google Street View, the valuer will be then dropped down directly outside the target property, the subject property. And during that process, they will then take screenshots of the front elevation, the streets seen, and that will be attached to the valuation site notes. The valuer then will move on to what's called the property attributes section. So within the property attributes section, there are a number of questions with regards to property age, property style, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, floor area. And we draw down those information points from the land registry, the energy performance certification database, and our data company that we work with, CoreLogic. Those are then presented back to the valuer, and the valuer will then record their own assumptions based on their own research of the property and local knowledge. We also have 2 inbuilt links within the iPad application. One is out to the BCIS calculator, so that should a lender require the reinstatement costs based on the assumed floor area, that can be provided. And then the final data source that we call upon, which is the comparable evidence linking directly into the surveyor comparable tool. And now the SCT report is an industry-wide data source that surveyors use to identify similar properties and provide the comparable evidence and their rationale for their valuation. So there are some of the key data sources that we pulled into the valuation process. And like I say, it's all integrated. So it's a seamless workflow without the surveyor having to come out onto Google and search different websites. So that's some of the key data sources that the valuer will use. And as Leon mentioned earlier, overlay that with their local knowledge to derive the valuation.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. And Leon, a couple of questions for you, really. I think in terms of that process, what's just been described there, quite a detailed level of data insight and overlaid with local knowledge. So is this something that is elongating the process? Does it take longer for a valuer to go through do a remote valuation, and also what goes on in the background in terms of any kind of auditing of that to ensure that the valuation is as accurate as it can be when it's passed on to the lender?
Sure. So a couple of points there. I'll start with the time element. It's very similar. So at the moment, we're saving the time in actually traveling to the property and inspecting physically, but we are doing a lot more detailed analysis, investigatory work with the data feeds that we've got to kind of replace that. So the time element is very similar, and the SCT that Mark talked about, so the sales comparison tool that we use with Rightmove, has always been a key element and takes a good chunk of the time anyway, and that process is exactly the same. So we still go into Rightmove and look for sales comparison data that will allow us to justify the valuation. That process is exactly the same. So I guess the simple answer is it's taking very, very similar amount of time. Our big saving is, we're not caught up in traffic, we're not out on the road, and then there's lots of nuances within that can obviously add delays to the process. So that probably answers the time element. And obviously we clearly state any limitations within the report. So if we are now obviously doing remote valuations as opposed to physicals, we're just caveating that with a paragraph to say that obviously due to COVID-19, this has been undertaken via a remote valuation as opposed to a physical. And I suppose the main things that are different there is we're not able to spot Japanese knotweed unless it's clear from Google. Very obvious, but it's those sort of things that we perhaps haven't been able to factor in, but pretty much everything else is there from the data that we have. Moving on to audits. So in normal BAU scenario, we would do a lot of audit anyway. We've kind of ramped that up. And one of our key areas of strengths is our real-time audit process. So where we actually audit before the report is sent out, so it's captured beforehand, and it's not an after event process where it's kind of too late. So we've always done that, and we've continued to do that, and we've massively ramped up the amount that we're doing. And we do that based on key triggers and key risks. And if, for example, we put a new process in place, so say, for example, more to life, we change your guidance or you change your guidance and we need to implement something, we will ramp up the number of audits that we do for that particular area to make sure that that has been heard loud and clear in the field, and the valuers are actually adhering to those processes, which helps us limit those risks. So that kind of is no different. We've just ramped it up. The other areas, again, that we do is a manager dip check. So managers are continuing to dip check work to ensure that there's coaching in the moment, and we're coaching where we see perhaps something that's been missed, or perhaps they've tried to upgrade it and we can find a digital footprint that they haven't perhaps managed to look at everything, that we've been able to find something. And during this period, the big difference is any upgrade now, we're asking managers to agree those upgrades before we go ahead with them, so that in all cases where possible, we are able to do the valuation via remote. And that's just the sort of things we're putting in at the moment, but we're constantly developing and constantly changing that to ensure we are as accurate as possible.
Great stuff. And we're only, I suppose, a couple of weeks now really into mobilising that, and More to Life was the first volume lender along with eSurv to sort of begin that process of doing these remote valuations en masse. So is there any unexpected things that have come out of that process, any quirks compared to what we would normally see on a physical val, or is it broadly the same?
I guess the key benefit for us is, although this is new for More to Life, and we would have ordinarily done a physical, we've been doing remote valuations now for about 2.5 years, probably over that now, come to think about it. And a lot of those initial teething issues you get with any new product or innovation, we've already overcome. So the only challenge, I suppose, or slight hurdle, is that because you didn't have a remote valuation process already yourselves, we're having to adapt the mortgage valuation form to fit the remote valuation terms. So it's a very minor thing that eventually we'll be able to solve via our IT partner. But that's probably the only hurdle that slows us down a little bit. And once we overcome that in coming weeks, depending on how long the lockdown progresses, that will save us time and also help with accuracy, because we can automatically map some of those things that perhaps at the moment we're having to manually go in and enter based on the guidance that we've received. But again, like I say, it's a very minor point. The only other thing that we are seeing is some cases without a digital footprint. And again, coming back to that point around how long this lasts, we're constantly looking at the moment in the background around what we can do to innovate, what we could actually do to overcome that if this perhaps goes on for longer than we would like it to. So there's always options, and all we've got to do is just sit down with yourselves and work out what those options are and agree on the risks and appetite as to whether we go down that route. So nothing really is not able to be solved. It's just about putting that process in place. So to reassure you, if things do progress and we're not eased at all, then there are solutions that we can look at as well.
Well, Leon, I want to congratulate you on the timing of your answer, because we lost Mark briefly, and just as you were coming to the end of your question, Mark's reappeared. So
yes, apologies, internet crash.
It's going to show this technology has its little quirks. So Mark, it's good timing, because I was going to just ask you one sort of supplementary question and then just wrap up one more question with Leon before we move on to Claire and Ailsa. But through this valuation process, this new way of working, what can advisors expect? As they're talking to their clients, can they reassure them that actually valuations are going to hold up through this new process, or are we going to see a different set of valuations coming out to what we were seeing with physical values? I guess some of that's tough to call, but is it going to be largely the same, or are we going to see some differences there?
Yeah, no, the valuations are robust. So again, as part of the product launch that we did in 2017, there was a lot of due diligence and testing, and the accuracy of remote valuations are comparable to the physicals. Obviously, the use of the comparable evidence, looking at similar transactions and properties within the locality, is obviously key to provide an accurate valuation. Like I say, the accuracy of remote valuations is well established, and as a result of that, many lenders are using the solution as BAU as part of secured lending. So the answer to your question is that the valuations will hold up, and your advice.
Ooh. Lost you there, Mark. I'll wait for you to. I'll move on. I'll move on to Leon, just in case it looks like Mark's having a few problems with his tech. But Leon, just one final question. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to call what's going to happen in the future. None of us have got a crystal ball on that one. But clearly, you guys are speaking to experts across this market, stakeholders across this market. What's the kind of general sentiment? I saw a news article a few weeks ago saying that maybe 500,000 housing transactions are going to be impacted by COVID-19 in one way or another. What's the general mood out there amongst the likes of estate agents? Is it reasonably positive and buoyant, or are we seeing a different sort of sentiment coming through?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one actually, and we regularly ask all our valuers to feed into us that information around what they're feeling in their markets, and obviously coming back to the point that they're all local, so we kind of get all that data right across the UK, and that feeds into a sentiment call that we have, and that's led by RICS. And it's a cross-industry call where everyone goes onto that call to kind of share that information. And although it is only anecdotal feedback at the moment, and there's nothing hard or concrete, it's been relatively positive. We haven't seen huge amounts of sales falling through. We are still seeing stuff go onto the market, and we are still seeing sold boards go up, even when perhaps not sure quite how they're getting around that with Essential, but it is still happening. So like I say, none of us have a crystal ball, but at the moment is positive. Only time will tell, I guess. And you know, it's very important that as valuers we don't set the market. We don't set the market or make the market. We just follow it. And you know, we will start to see evidence. And if we do see any signs of any change, then we will let you know. But at the moment, I think it's positive. And I guess it all depends on how long the lockdown goes for, and you know, what then impact that has on employment and various other factors. So that's probably a bit of a summary for you. I know it probably doesn't give you that crystal ball gazing that perhaps we all want, but it gives you a sign of things are reasonably positive at the moment.
It was a very cheeky question of me, Leon, and that's a very diplomatic answer. So thank you for that. So we've lost Mark again, unfortunately. So hopefully he'll come back. But I want to move on now anyway to the legal side, and if I can turn to you, Ailsa, first. So I think it'd be really helpful just to kick us off by just reminding us a little bit about the new legal process in this sort of new remote legal advice process that's been agreed. If you could just walk us through that.
Yeah, sure. I'll just screen share with you a process flow because it is quite a complicated process, and the flow makes it a little easier to understand what I'm talking about. I'll just try and share that with you now. Do you have that there?
We do, yeah, that's great.
Excellent. So just a quick recap on the standard process. We're instructed. We gather information with the client before we get an offer from More to Life. Then when we have the offer, we process that offer. We will report to the client about the product. We will send all of the various legal documentation that the client needs to execute to the client, and our solicitor, we have a fleet of mobile solicitors, one of them will attend the client's premises to execute the documentation, to verify the client's identity, and whilst they're there to undertake a capacity assessment and a duress assessment, which are, that's rule 8.4 of the Equity Release Council guidelines. The solicitors then will return to us the documentation. We have an app, so they send back digital images of the executed documents, and then they send them back in secure recorded post to us that day. We can then continue with the process to request completion. The key difference in the two processes is that the solicitor doesn't attend. The solicitor is interchanged for an independent adult witness of the client's choice. We still have to verify the client's identity, so we need to do that before we can proceed to processing the offer. We also need to process the independent witness's identity because, of course, our solicitors, we already have all of their identity verified. And that's done by reference to the client sending us in hard copies of their ID and signing a declaration to confirm that they're happy for us to talk to the independent witness, because of course the cornerstone of a solicitor-client relationship is confidentiality, and by talking to a witness we will be breaching that confidentiality, so we need that in writing. And once we have that in writing from the client, we will then conduct a call with the client, video call, and different funders have different requirements, so this process isn't suitable for all. If the client has tech, then it may well be able to go ahead. If they don't have tech, there isn't a chance of this process proceeding, unfortunately. But we have to verify that identity, and then we have to proceed to do exactly the same with the witness. We will then go back to the awaiting the product offer. When we have that offer, so once eSurv have done their bit and valued it, we get the offer through to us. We'll then produce our advice to the clients in writing, which we always do because this is a lifetime product, so they need to refer back. And then there will be a telephone or video, depending on the lender's requirements, contact with the client to go through that advice. And the client will then, after that appointment, need to arrange for their witness to attend their property in order to physically witness the execution of the documents. And I think that is the key misunderstanding over this change in process, that it may be believed that it's an execution only in line with a residential mortgage. It's not, because it is equity release and because of the law of property. There must be a physically present, independent adult witness for those deeds to be legally executed. So I think for most clients, their objective of not wanting the client to visit, the solicitor to visit them, is because they are isolating, so they don't want to have a person on their property. Unfortunately, there is no workaround for that because of the Law of Property Act. So they have to have somebody different, and that is an independent witness.
Great, thank you for talking us through that, Ailsa. It was really helpful. And Claire, I know you're in your position as somebody who sits on the standards board of the Equity Release Council. I think the gold standard, if you like, has always been the face-to-face advice that a client receives, and the independent face-to-face legal advice that they receive. And I guess this must have been quite a challenge for the industry to find a way through this that allows the industry to carry on, allows clients to continue on their journey, their equity release journey, while still maintaining the high quality bar that rightly the council wants to maintain. What's that been like from your perspective on the inside of that process?
Really, you're absolutely right. It's been a huge challenge because we talked about it at the Standards Board before lockdown was ever really actually thought to be likely to happen. And my initial reaction was, there's no way we can do this remotely. Actually, as a firm, we've always done face-to-face legal advice, but other firms haven't done. And it's only really since 2014 that it's been mandatory, in fact. And what's interesting about this is the firms that didn't used to do face-to-face are absolutely still gunning for face-to-face to be still remaining the gold standard, and to return to it as soon as possible. And in fact, not to even deviate to a remote legal advice model now, if they can avoid it. And that's exactly where we sit. We've had many conference calls. We had about when we were trying to develop this, you were absolutely right to say it was a rapid fire process with a lot of consultation, both with the council, being the standards board, the main board, and then with the solicitors, who obviously will have to adopt this process. There's a real challenge, I think, because there's a very big difference between how various firms operate, and I think it's been very difficult since we locked down for high street firms to operate on a face-to-face basis, because it's not been possible for clients to go into their offices. For us, it hasn't been so much of a challenge because our mobile agents are still very much able to go and see the clients. Whilst not exactly classed as key workers, they are still carrying out what is very important financial services work for clients of an age. So actually that hasn't been as much of a challenge as we thought it might be. But in terms of returning to gold standard, I think that's absolutely paramount for the reasons that Ailsa's outlined. There are a number of hurdles within this process, and deliberately so. And one of the major challenges for us was, things like, why are you asking for ID for the witness, for example, which isn't actually a legal requirement. And we built that into this process because we want to make sure that we're avoiding fraud and the idea that down the line we find out that somebody makes a claim against this client and they say, well, who witnessed that deed? Turns out that person doesn't exist or didn't exist. So it's really important to have tried to create as robust a process as we could possibly dream up. And it has not been designed to be easy to follow necessarily, or a get around or an execution only. It's very much designed to try and reflect as far as possible the robust standards within the original face-to-face process.
And I guess you kind of touched on it there in some of that response, but as we think about a client that's about to go through that legal process, what through to the point where they sign a mortgage deed and that allows a case to obviously then move to completion. What are the key issues that are being faced? What are the sort of concerns that are coming through from clients? Is it the fact they've still got to have somebody coming into onto their property, the signature of the deed? What are the sort of concerns that are coming through on that?
I think there is a concern before we've had a full conversation with the clients about somebody coming to witness the deed, but we moved to a contactless solicitor I think it would probably be towards the end of February when COVID started to gain a pace and we could see what was happening in China and then rolling through to Italy. We started to adapt and adopt social distancing straight away, given our demographic of clients. And when we explain to clients exactly how we foresee this working, so we've altered our sort of gold standard in terms of we're making sure there is advice on the telephone beforehand and then the solicitor attends. They do that at an appropriate social distance. They've been very resourceful. A lot of our solicitors have been doing appointments in gardens, etc. They're using full PPE because we managed to obtain that before the current PPE crisis happened. And all of them are providing weekly risk assessments to confirm they've not been in any contact, to ensure that they are as least culpable of contributing towards the spread of this disease as this pandemic as they can be. The concern is exactly that, though, having a stranger on the property, and that just cannot be avoided because it is set in legislation.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I mean, one of the first things that people say is, you know, Claire, why aren't you going back to the council and getting them to relax requirements about having to have documents witnessed physically? Why can't we just do it on a video call? And it is the Law of Property Act, and that's backed up in case law as well. So it's not just a question that we can just change that. That's not going to happen anytime soon. I know it's in consultation, but that's going to be down to the Law Commission to sort out down the line. But I don't suppose it's a priority right now.
No, understood. And it's interesting what you just said there, Ailsa, about obviously you guys going out with PPE. We're talking about customers that are potentially vulnerable, potentially highly vulnerable people. And Claire, in terms of the vulnerability side in particular, it's true, isn't it? In terms of spotting vulnerability, that's a lot harder to do, isn't it? When you're remote from somebody, it's when you're physically in front of an individual, you can pick up on visual clues, body language, things that are going on around in the environment. Much harder to do if it's being done over a video call. What's your take on that in terms of the impact on vulnerable customers here?
I think it's really hard, and I think that's why there needs to be a really detailed risk assessment at the beginning of a case as to what likely vulnerability is going to be on this. For example, talking to the client quite a lot at the beginning about what they're doing, why they're doing it now, can they wait, why can't they have a face-to-face? And one of the questions I think as well is if they say immediately, for example, we don't want a solicitor at our house, but they are prepared to have, you know, a friend or neighbour at their house, why, what's the objection? And is that because somebody is pulling the strings? Is there an issue? Are they in control? So there's a lot of nuanced information really around this, and it's not going to be a black or white. This is definitely possible to go down this route, or it isn't. I think you've got to do a lot of fact finding and understand that the client's family dynamics, and really try and front load that process as much as possible. And if you do decide, I think that it is possible to go down the remote legal advice service, then you've just got to have as many contact points with that client as possible, and we've built 4 in which are designed really to try and develop a rapport with that client, to try and understand all of their circumstances, reasons and needs and everything else, and to compare and contrast that with what the financial advice. So there's a lot more about sharing information as well within this process, and that could be also via the surveyors, from whatever they're finding with any contact from that client. But you're absolutely right. There is no substitute rather than to go around to somebody's house and to actually look into the whites of their eyes and really understand what they're doing, and actually to go into the house to actually see the state of it, so to understand its condition. Look around photographs, for example, that might be sitting on there. Even the smell of the house actually will give you some clues as to how people are living. And without being able to do that, obviously we can't do that on a video call, but we're doing as much as we can. And one of the things that we're trialing is, if we use this process, is going to be speech emotion recognition, so that from contact point 1, we start developing speech patterns with the clients, so that we understand if we feel that they're under duress as time goes on, and if somebody else is there, not holding a gun to their head, we don't imagine, but essentially really trying to push them down the route of taking the money out. And we think that the risks are heightened at the moment because so many people are unfortunately losing their jobs. And naturally enough, families are going to be crying out for the bank of mum and dad.
Of course, yeah.
I think on the flip side of that, though, families will want to help out children, so it's not always a bad news story.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. It's a really interesting point, and I think that's something we want to come on to in a separate webinar. Actually, we've got a whole webinar dedicated to vulnerability based on some updated research we've done with advisors. So for anyone watching this, if you're interested to know a bit more about the subjects of vulnerability and some insights into vulnerable clients and how advisors are viewing that, please do tune into that. We'll be doing a webinar in a couple of weeks' time. But just a couple of final points to you, Ailsa. I think in terms of this process, it sounds as though, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds as though this is probably going to take a little bit longer perhaps than it would have ordinarily done when we were doing before the lockdown. Is there anything that advisors can or should be doing to sort of prep their clients up front before they get to the point of the legal process to help ease them through that, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I think the advisors perhaps need to talk through the standard process and actually understand the difference between the two processes. Not every case is going to be suitable for this stay-at-home procedure because there are a number of different filters. For example, if the client doesn't have photo ID and isn't sufficiently tech-savvy to be able to engage via a Zoom conference or similar, that's probably going to stop the case from proceeding on that basis anyway. Different lenders and funders have different criteria. So again, they need to really know their products or just be sufficiently generic in advice regarding the stay-at-home procedure. And then they've got to find this independent witness. Those witnesses they will need to have ID, but they may not be willing to engage with us, so they might fail on their first attempt. And then we're going to have to see documentation going back and forth, so the client needs to be prepared that they're going to have to be quite involved in driving this process forward. At the moment, the way the process is honed after sort of many years of experience in it, it's very streamlined. We manage that process, so it's very convenient and it goes through very quickly and very smoothly. This is going to be relying on a client who doesn't have that familiarity, who's going to have to find documents for us, who's going to have to organise a witness to come round to them. There's even the small practical considerations such as when those documents are signed, what's going to happen to them? How are they going to get back to us? Because they've got to go in the post to come back to us. Are they going to be entrusted to standard post, or is somebody going to go out to get them recorded delivery? And for every moment those documents are not in the client's ownership or ours, there's a risk there of that documentation containing confidential personal information going astray. All of those things add to the anxiety of this remote process, and I think advisors need to, when they're engaging with their clients, get to understand them, because I think this will worry a lot of clients. We're dealing with a vulnerable cross-sector, and the process that is in place in normal times is designed to be as stress-free as it can be whilst getting the legal process done to the satisfaction of the lenders, such that the clients can achieve their objective.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your input today. I'll just do one final round, and I'll go in order that you appear in. It's a bit like the Brady Bunch, this. So I'll start with Claire. But look, we're 5 weeks in, or this is the 5th week of lockdown, I think. Who knows how much longer we've got? At least another couple of weeks, maybe a little bit longer, and social distancing likely to go on. Who knows? Perhaps even towards the end of the year, perhaps even into next year, if you believe some of the more pessimistic stories. But what's your sort of personal outlook of how things are going to progress over the next few weeks, and how advisors should be thinking and adapting to this new world? Claire, if I could start with you in terms of your outlook.
Yeah, the reasons that people are going to do equity release and the need for that equity release product hasn't changed. And I think my own personal view is that I think it's going to be a little bit like last year was with Brexit, and I think it will be the people that do the equity releases will be the people that need to do it, not the lifestylers. So I think people who are doing it for the lifestyle, the holidays and everything else will obviously hold off. And the people that need to do it for debt recovery reasons or helping family and all of that sort of stuff, I think that they'll probably carry on. But I think there will be some real concern around self-isolating. I was out for a walk this morning with the dog, and you know, I met somebody who's over 70, and she's very, very concerned about seeing, you know, neighbours inviting friends around and that sort of thing. So I think the fear is out there, and that's going to take some getting over, to be honest.
Yes, indeed, yeah. And Leon, same sort of question to you. What's your take and outlook for next year?
Yeah, I guess no one really knows, I guess, but all I can say is we're staying very, very close to government guidelines. We're planning for every eventuality, so we're already looking at ways in which we can move to the next stage if we have to. We're used to change anyway, so the industry has been through quite a bit of change over the last couple of years anyway, and we will continue to innovate and change in order to adapt to whatever situation is thrown at us. We're already looking at provisions for PPE. We've got some in stock, and looking at, right, if we can start to get out and do some form of physical inspections, we're ready for it. So it's just to reassure you really that we're okay. We'll continue. We still have full national coverage. And obviously we'll do everything we possibly can to support you and your customers in the foreseeable future. And that's it for me, really.
Great stuff. And Ailsa, you touched on it just a moment ago in terms of the things that advisors probably need to be prepping themselves for and prepping their clients for. But you know, what's your take on the next few weeks and months? Is it still really uncertain, do you think, or from a legal process point of view, do you think we'll start to get into a groove with this, and things will become a little bit more a little easier for people to get their heads around, do you think?
I think that probably depends on what the government decides to do with, for example, mortgage holiday payments, because a lot of equity releases are redeeming existing residential mortgages, and the clients come under pressure because that product's come to an end. At the moment there's a mortgage holiday there, so the existing residential lenders will not be pressing for that to be repaid at this time. Once that's lifted, I think it puts a different complexion on matters, because people are put under pressure at the moment that whilst they might not be able to meet that mortgage, or it's come to the end of its term, there isn't the pressure to deal with it or the threat of litigation. Once that comes back into the picture, the clients are in a very difficult position, because there are all the government guidelines, there are the requirements to isolate. So it depends on what stages of undoing the current sanctions, or how they happen, as to how this looks. But let's hope that they don't lift mortgage payments and that holidays and keep in place the current restrictions, because that does put the clients between a rock and a hard place on those type of cases. And you know, we want to help clients, we want to help them achieve their objectives quickly and safely, both physically and from data safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, sorry, we lost you again a little bit earlier. You're back with us again.
I am. Apologies.
I'll come to you finally, just as a final sort of view from yourself, and how you'll sort of your outlook for the next few weeks and months as we move through this crisis.
Yeah, as we move into the equity release market, this is a sort of a new area for a lot of us. So I'd be very keen to encourage your advisors to share any examples of good practice that may be working, issues or challenges or things that aren't working, so that they can share, and we can look to adapt and innovate to try and improve the process for all parties involved.
Fantastic. Well, listen guys, I really do appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me, Claire and Leon and Ailsa and Mark. Really, that was a great chat and some really good insight there, and walking us through those various processes that we're all, you know, gradually getting our heads around and working out how all this fits together. So thank you for your time, and thank you for watching today. As I said, we are running lots of webinar content, new webinar content over the course of the next few weeks, including that presentation on vulnerability that I mentioned. So watch out for information and news on that in your inboxes, and you can find information on our website as well. But for now, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next program. Thank you very much.